Hey guys, Mr. Pokke here, back with another video. Today, I'll be exploring with you guys my beginner's guide to welcome all the new players who are coming in from the PS5 as well as any additional new players who may stumble upon my channel. In this guide, I'll be exploring with you guys the different progressions that the players will face between the early game, mid game as well as end game. Each different phases of progression will be different tips and tricks that I'll be teaching to you guys, such as your units to raise, the useful Gacha 4 stars to look out for, the useful Gacha Lightcones to look out for, stamina allocation, the store guide, spending guide, and all that kind of good stuff, right? So this is going to be a very comprehensive guide, and without further ado, let's get into today's content. So starting with the disclaimer, the guide that I've created today is updated for version 1.4. Most of the content in Honkai Star Rail have remained relatively unchanged since version 1.0. That being said, there are new things implemented within this game, such as the new team compositions, new relic sets, as well as endgame content such as Swarm Disaster that were previously not available to us back when the game first released. As the time goes on, some of the content of this guide might get outdated, but I would dare say 99% of the content here is going to be remaining relevant to the players who are watching this guide. Next up, this guide applies to all players. This is not just for free-to-play and low spenders because, like I mentioned just now, there is going to be a spending guide which is going to be pertaining more to the whale players, right? One important thing to note here is that you cannot really whale your way out of inefficient team building and stamina usage in Honkai Star Rail because number one, stamina refreshes only go up to 8 times a day, and number two, no matter how much you whale, if you guys cannot build a proper team comp, then you're just gonna have a very difficult time playing this game. And lastly, this entire guide is meant to be a guideline and is not meant to be rules. At the end of the day, Honkai Star Rail is a game meant to be enjoyed. So the content that I'm offering to you guys is aimed to improve your player experience through improved efficiency, whether be it the farming efficiency or the team building efficiency or exactly what kind of stuff do you buy in the shops. So that's gonna be that for the disclaimers of this guide. So going to our table of content, I'll be splitting the guide into 3 different segments, namely the early game, mid game, and end game. For the early game, it is where your players, you guys just started creating a game, you guys are still deciding if you want to re-roll, ranging from roughly Trailblazer level 1 to Trailblazer level 29. In this stage, it's mostly just about exploring the game itself, exploring the story, and basically just mess around and have fun. You don't really need to be super min-max in terms of efficiency, so this is really just like the testing ground. That's why the early game is definitely a place for you guys to experiment. Now for the mid game is where you reach Trailblazer level 30 to all the way to around 49. This is where you need to start really start allocating your stamina more efficiently, because from Trailblazer level 50 onwards, especially if you guys start to raise units from level 70 to level 80, it's gonna cost a lot of resources. So we should start to develop a good habit into farming the most efficient stamina usage places from the mid game onwards, right? And lastly, for the end game, you guys can see over here, this is where your Trailblazer reaches level 50 and above, and you should start trying to build the duo team composition, because Memory of Chaos as well as Forgotten Hall, you do need 2 different team comps to tackle this specific content. Before endgame, I would heavily advise players to not build 2 team comps too early, because you're divesting too much of your resources all over the place, which might give you a little bit more difficulty when it comes to clearing other content such as Simulated Universe. So with that established, here are some quick tips that I guess everybody can go for even before starting to play the game. And number 1 is that you don't need to re-roll in Honkai Star Rail. All units in Honkai Star Rail, they can be used to clear the endgame content, which is going to be Memory of Chaos as well as Swarm Disaster. The main goal, especially when you just start out playing the game, is to complete the story as fast as possible so they can earn a lot of Trailblazer experience, and having more Trailblazer experience translates into higher equilibrium levels. A higher equilibrium level unlocks more things which will give you greater returns based on the stamina usage. So for one very good example is that in the early on, you will notice that for your Tracers farming, like Calyx farming in Calyx Golden and Calyx Crimson, you'll only see like level 1, level 2, all the way to level 5. So the more advanced the Trailblazer level is, the more resources you gain from spending the same amount of stamina. That's why players should try to just clear as much story as possible, just earn as much stamina as possible, and this will help you guys progress a lot further. Next thing, when it comes to basic team building composition, this is going to be applicable to you throughout the entire lifespan of this game, especially if you're not a whale. So for the most part, 1 sustain, 1 DPS, and 2 supports should be enough to just last you through the majority, if not all, of the content. In the early game, when you guys don't have access to so many different units, you might need to use 2 sustain to get you guys through, especially for harder content such as Swarm Disaster as well as Simulated Universe early on, right? Eventually, when your sustain and team is strong enough, you can take out 1 sustain and just slot in 1 more support. Or you could start researching into alternative team comps such as 1 main DPS and 1 sub DPS. Or if you guys have really strong relics, you could just go for the 1 hyper carry and 3 support team comp. But these are just different branches and different modifications stemming from the original 1 sustain, 1 DPS, and 2 supports. So that's the basic team building criteria. Next, do not save your stamina. I've seen a lot of players make this mistake since starting out in Honkai Star Rail, where they hoard like 10, 20, 30 different stamina potions. The reason why you do not want to save your stamina potions is because you're basically stalling the time it would take you to reach to the next equilibrium level. And as I've mentioned just now, higher equilibrium level translates into more rewards, not only in farming, in Calyx, in terms of your stagnant shadows, in your Cavern of Corrosion, as well as even overworld farming and simulated universe farming. So generally speaking, there is never a situation where you guys will want to save your stamina for months and months on end. The only exception I can think of is if MiHoYo releases a new relic set that's going to be coming up, because so far we have received 1 new relic set that's entered into the game, and in the future we're probably going to see more relic sets. So in anticipation for new relic sets, then players maybe can store a little bit of stamina here and there, but for the most part, most players should just hit a level 65 as soon as possible, because level 65 is when you fully unlock every single resources at their maximum efficiency. In particular, your Cavern of Corrosion it is where a chance for you to get up to 3 gold relics as well as all purple relics, which will give you guys a lot of relic experience, right? So that's why do not save your stamina potions. And then for another point is to avoid rushing into the end game. It might sound kind of contradictory compared to you guys shouldn't save your stamina, but at the same time you guys shouldn't rush into the end game. Now what I mean by rushing into the end game is you guys shouldn't try to rush and build your 2 different teams of 8. What you guys should do is to just focus on the core units you need to build, and the core units I'll be explaining a little bit later. So just focus on your DPS, your support, and your sustain. Don't try to build too many different units just for the sake of clearing MOC, especially MOC, because MOC, there are jades that are tied to every 2 weeks, right? But honestly, the jades given by the MOC is very negligible. The jades for clearing 30 out of 30 MOC is only 600 jades, which is not even a 10 pool. So honestly, it's very negligible, and players should just take their time and develop stronger units, develop their tracers for the core units, so that eventually they can have a much easier time transitioning to the future, right? Don't rush into the end game. And one thing to note on top of the not rushing to the end game is that if you guys decide to invest, for example, in level 80 units, the amount of resources you need from level 70 to 80, as well as the amount of tracers you need for trace level 8 to level 10 is a lot higher compared to raising units from level 1 to 70. For the 5th point is avoid farming relics early on, right? Relic farming is going to be something you're going to be doing for the rest of your life in Honkai Star Rail, because the relic RNG this game is really rough. So that being said, it is a massive stamina sink for very little returns, because you're trying to hunt for the perfect main stat and the perfect subset, right? So as long as you don't hit the right main stat and subset, it's just going to be going to waste. On top of this, relic farming early on is very inefficient, because you basically don't even get gold gear, and you really only start to get guaranteed like 2 gold gears from level 60 onwards, Trailblazer level 60. So in the early game, really just avoid farming relics, and I'll be explaining this a little bit later on. And for the last point is just a little quality of life, is that there is assignments and daily check-in is kind of a common thing occurring in all gacha games. For your assignments, 3 of the 4 you have to use them on your credits, unit experience, as well as Lightcone experience, because these 3 things, they are limited by your stamina usage. Everything else you can pretty much just have a lot of them. You have an abundance of all the other materials. So these 3 things is going to be the key. The last 4 thing, honestly, you can just do whatever you want. And lastly, the Hoyo Lab check-in, unfortunately, it is from an external application in Hoyo Lab. It is not an in-game daily check-in. So do remember to download Hoyo Lab or just check out the web browser version to get some very nice goodies. And that's all I have for some quick tips. Okay, so the very first thing to know for the early game is the units to raise. The units to raise is gonna be crucial because assuming that you guys didn't even get any good units from pulling the gacha or pulling the whatever, these units are pretty much gonna be able to help you guys out for a very long amount of time. And the units to raise, it will be ultimately dependent on what kind of 5 stars you guys get from the departure banner. The departure banner is basically a system where within 50 pulls, you are guaranteed to get 1 5-star unit from the standard banner. So this 5-star is going to be very helpful when it comes to team building. So the units to raise will be based on what kind of 5 stars you guys get. So as you guys can see over here, if you guys got yourself a 5-star DPS, namely Yanqing, Clara, Himiko, and Welt, then these 3 units, March 7th, Natasha, and Asta, is very safe to raise. And then the last slot can just be given to the 5-star DPS. The reason why I recommend running both March 7th and Natasha, it might seem like a little bit of overkill, is because we want to try to future-proof our account progression as much as possible. So you could take out, like for example, you could take out March 7 and then slot in another DPS such as Servo or Win Dunhane, but the reality is it is very likely that you would not use them going forward into the future, especially at level 80 when you start getting more and more different 5-star units, right? For example, Dunhane, there's a very strong Win DPS known as Blade, and then for Servo, there's also a very strong Lightning DPS such as Kafka and Jingyuan. That's why for the most part, we try to limit our resources enough to get us through the early game, but not so much to the point where the resources are getting put to waste. So in this case, March 7th, Natasha and Asta, they're all going to be very useful. They're going to help you clear the first early stages of the game, and when you eventually transition into 2 different team comps for Memory of Chaos, one side can run Natasha and one side can run March 7. March 7 can definitely solo sustain as long as you give her enough relic investment, right? So that's why all these units that we're being invested here, we're definitely going to be using them for a long time. If you guys are, however, got yourself a 5-star support, and the only 5-star support we have in the standard banner is going to be Bronya, then you do need to raise a DPS to help you guys get through the early game, right? So we're still going to be raising March 7th with Natasha and Asta. You could consider March 7th Natasha plus 1 DPS. This could be Dunhane, this could be Servo, and these are basically all the free units that are guaranteed for free, right? Or you could take out one of the sustain and then just throw in Asta. So the sustain I'll recommend taking out early game is going to be March 7th, because while March 7th sustain is good, Natasha's sustain early game is going to be a lot better, especially when consider that you don't have any good relics. So in this situation, Natasha, Dunhane, Asta, as well as your Bronya, it should be a very good team composition as well. If your 5-star standard banner unit is going to be a sustain unit such as Bailu and Japart, then you guys can actually consider not raising one of the sustain, being either March 7 or Natasha. So for example, you guys could just go ahead and raise Asta, Dunhane, and Servo, or you guys could just drop Servo and then raise Natasha / March 7, because like I said, you do need 2 different sustain units to get you through the 2 different team comps for Memory of Chaos, right? Bailu and Japart, they're definitely able to solo sustain, so for the most part, you could just not raise a sustain unit for now, but going forward into the future, it's still going to be in your benefit, and that's why I always recommend, if you guys don't mind the slower clear time, raising 2 sustains early on will save you quite a bit of time when you try to transition into the Memory of Chaos in the end game. One last thing is for players who basically want to reroll, in a sense. If you guys really want to reroll, or if you guys just want to be spending players and spend your money and get some of the current better unit, so if you guys decide to pull for either Jingliu or Sile, you guys could choose to invest in either Natasha or March plus Asta plus the 5-star you guys got from the departure, and then as well Jingliu or Sile, right? So this team is basically like the spending players team or the re-rollers team. If you guys want to have a super fast, super smooth experience clearing the early game as fast as possible, then this is going to be essentially what you're going to be raising, right? And that will wrap it up for the first units to raise. Now we will move on to the useful gacha 4-stars that you might encounter when you're pulling for units, be it the standard banner or the limited banner, right? So if you're going to see here, these 5 units, Tingyun, Pella, Yukong, Lynx, and Asta. Now, Tingyun, she's essentially a 5-star unit in disguise. She has energy regeneration, damage percentage, attack percentage, and she's skill point positive. She's basically a must race if you're lucky enough to get Tingyun within your pools. Pella, she does have AoE defense down, skill point positive, and it's very cheap to raise because you essentially only need to raise her ultimate and talent. So also a very good unit to raise. Yukong, this is more like a future proof, more like a late game unit because she only really shines when you get her to Eidolon 6. Before Eidolon 6, you could consider not raising her for now. But if you can afford to speed tune your team such that the units gain the benefits from Yukong, then you could raise Yukong. Right? To find out how you speed tune, how do you build Yukong, check out all of my unit guides in my YouTube channel. Right? For Lynx, she's the only other 4-star healer, and she's really good for a Memory of Chaos, since like I mentioned, you do need 2 teams with 2 different sustains. Lynx is essentially Natasha, but better in a sense where her ultimate does a team-wide cleanse. When you guys try to play Memory of Chaos, especially in the later stages like Memory of Chaos 9 and 10, there will be quite a few annoying crowd control or debuffs that will be inflicted to your team. Lynx is gonna be able to deal with this very nicely, while Natasha, she only cleanses with her skill, and that's only 1 target. Lastly, Asta, although we do get Asta for free, she does have very good idolants, so if you guys manage to pull some of Asta's idolants, then there's even more reason to raise Asta. But this is kind of not relevant because you should be raising Asta anyways, because she's a really good support for you guys. Next, here are some of the useful gacha Lightcones that you guys might face. Listed here is basically Sword Play, Good Night and Sleep Well, Dance, Day 1 of My New Life, Perfect Timing, Secret Vow, and Genius's Repose. All of these is essentially each of their paths, right? Hunt, Nihility, Harmony, and so on and so forth. There are also some other honorable mentions, such as Resolution Lightcone, Planetary Rendezvous, Landau's Choice, and Seriousness of Breakfast. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is, all these gacha Lightcones, they are really decent, and if you guys do manage to get yourself a copy of this, then consider adding them to your team. But if you guys are not going to be pulling so much, for example, if you guys are not interested in Jingliu or Sile, then this section will not be too relevant. But if you do manage to see some of these Lightcones, then feel free to go ahead and raise them. Even to this point where we have so many 5-star Lightcones, so many single Lightcones, these 4-star Lightcones are just so free to play friendly that I will highly advise you guys to run them. So with all that aside, we can finally talk a little bit about the stamina allocation that you guys will go from level 1 to level 29. At level 7, it is where you go all in on your departure walk, because at around level 7 you should have roughly 50 standard tickets, and you would be able to just go all in and just dump everything. Stop when you guys get a 5-star, right? So just try to get a 5-star. The moment you get a 5-star, then you can just let it go, right? So that we can use this 5-star and help us in terms of our team composition, because not only do we get a 5-star, we might also get some pretty decent 4-star as well, right? At level 11, it's time for you to try to get the treasure chest from the HSS as well as J6 row, and then we can start doing Simulated World 1 and 2 for some of the free clear rewards, right? And then at level 12, assignments will unlock. So like I mentioned just now, please get your credits, your unit experience, as well as your Lightcone experience. Focus on completing the operation briefing, right? This entire time you guys will have this new beginner's mission sort of thing called operation briefing, where if you guys complete the things there, it should be very natural, and you guys will just progress very smoothly, and the gears that they give you within this are quite useful, especially in the early game. So just focus on trying to complete this as much as possible. And then once you reach level 20 to 29, do not farm Crimson Calyx yet. Still focus on your operation briefing even at this point. Do know that at level 24, you do want to start opening your treasures and do more side quests. And once you unlock Echoes of War, wait until Sunday, which is the last day of the week, before clearing it, because in the event that you get to Trailblazer level 30, the rewards for Echoes of War will increase, right? So, and this Echoes of War can only be done 3 times a week, so ideally you always want to do this at the very last day of the week. At level 29, it is when you start to unlock Xianzhou Luofu, and you can go ahead and explore the world over there. And that is essentially it for the early game guide, right? Just go ahead and explore, build the different units. It's very cheap to raise units from level 1 to 40 or even 50. So just explore, build different things, and then see what you guys like, and then just run with whatever you guys enjoy. Now we'll be moving on to the mid. Now, mid game is where I want to introduce to you guys some of the store guides and spending guides, because at this point you're probably a little bit more invested in Honkai Star Rail itself. So there are 2 main shops, the Starlight Exchange as well as the Embers Exchange. For the Starlight Exchange, never ever buy the 4 stars, even if it's a TV, because it is very inefficient. Just wait until you eventually get the 4-star copy from a normal gacha. The only thing that you guys should get from the Starlight Exchange, in my opinion, is to save up 600 of the Undying Starlight and get the Bronya Lightcone. Bronya Lightcone, the battle isn't over. It is still the most universal and future-proof standard Lightcone to date. Essentially, almost every single support, almost every single Harmony unit can make use of Bronya's Lightcone. Personally, for me, I even got myself 2 different copies just because of how universal it is. Afterwards, players can decide to either all in into special passes Or for the spenders who have a lot of Undying Starlight, because you guys put a lot, you could consider getting yourself a S5 Bronya Lightcone. This S5 Bronya Lightcone is going to be really good, especially if you guys have Bronya. So that's going to be that for the Starlight exchange. And then for Embers exchange, this is going to be the order of priority. You focus on your special pass and standard pass first, followed by your Tracks of Destiny, followed by your credits / experience, and then followed by your trace materials. Focus on getting the blue trace materials, then the green trace materials. Lightcone experience and relic experience is not as useful in the early game. You guys could get them on a per need basis in the future. For now, the main key is to just raise your units level as high as possible, as well as raising their traces. Their Lightcone as well as their relics is really not that important for now, but in the future that's going to be up to the player's perspective. 1-2 is going to be the most important thing. Please clear out your special pass, standard pass, as well as Tracks of Destiny. For me right now, I am desperately finding Tracks of Destiny because I'm just raising so many different units. Some players might not face this issue, especially if you're only raising 4 units or 8 units, but in the future when you want to raise multiple units, Tracks of Destiny is going to be one of the biggest bottleneck you'll face, so please get them. Now we'll be moving on to the spending guide. This is very straightforward. We'll be talking about the order of value as well as the battle pass Lightcone you guys can get. So in the order of value, number 1 is going to be the express pass. This is the cheapest and it gives you the most amount of Stellar Jades. Number 2 is going to be the battle pass. It doesn't give as much Stellar Jades, but it does gives you a lot of resources like trace materials, unit experience, pools, Lightcone experience, relic experience. So many good things from the battle pass. And lastly, if you guys are still not enough, then go ahead and get your on-rig shop from the most expensive to the least expensive. Do not buy anything from the contract shop with your on-rig shots. The only good contract there is the resource supply, and even that resource supply is only good for players who refresh more than 5 times a day. And at this point, I also just want to kindly insert, if you guys are thinking of refreshing stamina, I personally would advise against it, especially if you are free to play, because stamina, you guys can just slowly play away through. This is a PvE game. There's no rush to just rush through the content. So for free to players, I definitely wouldn't recommend doing any sort of refresh and just saving them for your pools. But for maybe light spenders or even dolphins, spending up to 1 to 3 stamina refreshes can drastically improve the speed in which you progress your account, right? Because a single stamina refresh is 60 stamina, which is essentially 6 hours of your time, right? And 3 stamina refreshes is 18 hours. So it is very efficient, especially if you want to reach to level 65 as soon as possible. But if you're free to play, then I would advise against refreshing stamina. Next, for the Battle Pass Lightcone, I can only recommend 2 choices. Number 1 is going to be Peaceful Day, and number 2 is going to be Carve the Moon with the Clouds. Once you decide to get a Battle Pass Lightcone, only buy that specific Battle Pass Lightcone. Get it to S5 as soon as possible, and do not buy like S1 of this, S1 of that, S1 of this, right? Don't do that, because at S1, these Lightcones are really not that strong. Their true value only starts to shine when they reach S5. Why I rank Peaceful Day above Carve the Moon is because Harmony Lightcones, which is Carve the Moon, they have a lot of good substitutes, such as Bronya's Lightcone, Dance, Planetary Rendezvous, Coggers, and Memories of the Past, right? All these are really good. Whereas for Erudition Lightcones, Peaceful Day is super good, much better than the alternative Erudition Lightcones we have, such as Genius, Repose, as well as Seriousness of Breakfast. So by opportunity cost, Peaceful Day provides players a little bit more value, especially if they want to run some Erudition units such as Himeko or even Qingyuan in the future. Now we've come to the stamina allocation for the mid game, which is when your Trailblazer level 30 to 49. So for 30 to 39 is when Stagnant Shadow unlocks. These are essentially the essential materials you need to bring your characters to the next ascension, right? Only farm enough for 4 characters. Do not overfarm Stagnant Shadows, because every single time you go to the next Trailblazer, or rather every single time you go to the next equilibrium level, which is 40, 50, 60 and 65, you get more and more Stagnant Shadow materials, right? So in terms of stamina efficiency, just farm enough for you to ascend all your units to this stage and then forget about it. You don't have to worry about raising 8 units now, just focus on the 4 units itself, right? So recommended at this stage to just farm more character experience. Do not farm relics. I repeat, do not farm relics before Trailblazer level 40 due to the points I mentioned back in quick tips. For now, only rely on treasure boxes for relics, because if you guys have been exploring the world long enough, as well as the operation briefing, you get quite a few purple gears which are very decent. They are the right sets and they can benefit your account really high, so you don't really need to worry about relics that much, and just get the free relics and upgrade them to like +9 or even +12, and they are definitely enough to clear all the content that you guys need. only consider hard farming relics that really go ham on relics at level 60 and above, right? So that's gonna be that. At level 40, Trailblazer level 40 is when your Cavern of Corrosions guarantees you 1 gold relic, 1 gold guaranteed. At this stage, players can start considering to run a little bit of relic farming just for your main DPS. Just get the right main stats and forget about it. Do not try to chase subsets because you're going to be spending a lot of stamina and it's just not efficient whatsoever. Your supports and sustain, they are perfectly serviceable with the free gears. So if you guys want to farm for relics here, just farm for a main DPS, get the right main stats and call it a day. What are the right main stats? Are essentially like crit damage or crit rate chest, attack or speed boots, attack rope, as well as the elemental damage sphere, right? So that's gonna be that. At this point, the main thing you guys should be farming from level 40 to 49, especially after you secure your main stat for your main DPS, is back to credits, back to experience, and some traces and essential materials. But for the most part, it's always gonna be credits and experience. Always farm credits and experience, especially credits, because when you guys, like I mentioned, from level 70 to 80 and leveling traces from 8 to 10, it's gonna cost a lot of credits. So that's why you should be farming this as much as possible. Finally, we've reached the end game portion of the guide, which is Trailblazer level 50 and above. So we'll first talk a little bit about the end game content. There's two main endgame content, which is basically Memory of Chaos as well as Swarm Disaster. Forgotten Horde, it is a permanent endgame content as well as Swarm Disaster. Actually, they won't go anywhere. You can do them day 1, you can do them 3 months later. The rewards are basically fixed, so there's no rush to do them whatsoever. The only thing that there's a little bit of a sense of urgency is Memory of Chaos, because Memory of Chaos, you do get 600 jades and quite a lot of credits, and this refreshes every 2 weeks. But like I mentioned, players should not farm and try to rush to Memory of Chaos as soon as possible, because it's just not going to be efficient in terms of team building, right? Now, in endgame content, especially when we reach Trailblazer level 50, is when you can start developing your second team, right? Try to raise up your second team and slowly make your way through the endgame content. Still focus on your core 4 units, and your core 4 units should be the main primary objective, and then the other 4 units that you're bringing into Memory of Chaos is going to be the secondary objective, right? So players should still be slowly developing their teams before committing, because like I mentioned, the resources needed to raise units from level 70 to 80 as well as the tracers is astronomical, right? So do not make the mistake of raising the wrong units from 70 to 80, because every single thing before then, you had all the time in the world to experiment. Just raising to level 50 and 60 is completely fine, but from 70 to 80 is where you really decide, okay, I'm gonna be investing and using this unit for a long time. So do make the right decision when it comes to this. And once again, like I mentioned, another reason why you shouldn't be rushing into endgame content. Then for farming content is that once at this point, players may find a lack of things to do, especially after the farming. So this is where I would recommend some players to just do some overall farming as well as a simulated universe runs. This will provide you guys quite a substantial amount of extra resources, ranging from credits, unit experience, as well as relic experience. That being said, this is very time consuming. Right now, it takes about 1 hour to 1 hour 30 minutes to farm all 3 rows every single day. And then for Simulated Universe, you can farm up to 34 times a week. And in the early game, especially in the early game, players wouldn't be able to farm Simulated Universe very quickly. So a single round of Simulated Universe could take you anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes. So do this at your own pace. There are some additional rewards, but don't make this the end all be all. Do not burn out trying to farm for this, because there have been a lot of players burning out trying to get the maximum potential rewards only to hate log into playing Honkai Star Rail, because it just takes so much time. And lastly, when it comes to stamina allocation, from level 50 to 59 is when your experience, your golden calyx is maxed out. So for 50 to 59, you should be all in experience and credits, because this is when you reach the maximum efficiency when it comes to farming them, right? So just all in credit experience and do nothing but that, because trust me, you will need a lot of this. In the meantime, farm a little bit of tracers, farm a little bit of essential materials for a secondary team as well as for a main team, but for the most part, all in experience and credits. And then secondly is, like I mentioned just now, is where you start building your second team for Forgotten Horde, which is also a good thing that you're farming credit and experience here, so they can easily raise up the levels for your remaining 4 units. Once you reach level 60, congratulations, you have unlocked the 2 gold relics per farm. You're guaranteed 2 gold relics drops now. So this is where players can consider upgrading your relics to more gold qualities for all your DPS, your support, and your sustain. But still, only focus on the main stats. Do not farm for substats because it is still not at the maximum efficiency. Only chase substats once you reach Trailblazer level 65 and above, because at Trailblazer level 65 and above, you are guaranteed to get all purple relics, so you get more relic experience as fodders, and sometimes you can get up to 3 golden relics. So don't care about substats, so still focus on main stats, but now for your entire team. And at this point, level 60, what I personally did back then was to all in trace materials, because 60 is when you reach the highest efficiency for the Crimson Calyx dungeons. So now you can actually go all in on trace materials, so it ties up very nicely. From 50 to 59 you do credits and experience, and then from 60 to 65 you do traces, and then from 65 onwards you do relics. So this is the general guideline I'll recommend, especially when you try to transition into the end game, right? And like I mentioned, at this point it will cost a lot of resources to raise units from level 70 to 80, so do keep a mental note in mind. And with that, we've come to the end of my beginner's guide. I hope that this guide was useful to your Star Rail journey. I might have missed out some things here and there. I tried to include as many things as possible. If there's anything that you guys would like to point out, feel free to add them in the comment section down below. If you guys would like to engage in further discussions, feel free to check out my Discord, Pokke's Village, where we have a very active community talking about Honkai Star Rail on a daily basis. If you guys want to check out my stream, that's going to be twitch.tv/MrPokke. I stream 3 times a week, and the schedule will be updated on Discord as well, right? So with that, we've come to the end of today's content. All the best if you guys are going to be putting for Jingliu or to get your Bronya, your Departure Warp, all this kind of stuff, right? So I'll be seeing you guys next time. Take care.